That's the story. There was no deal. There was no other considerations. And when I arrived in America, I want to tell you, I was a very sick man. I had to rest in San Francisco. When I arrived in Dallas, Texas, immediately the doctors brought me directly to the hospital and then checked me. On that Monday, May 12, they gave me an arteriogram. At 1 o'clock that day, my Filipino doctor, cardiologist, Dr. Rolando Solis, came and said, Senator, he said, I'm sorry, but you have to undergo a triple bypass. I said, Doctor, what day is today? Sabi niya, May 12. Tomorrow is May 13, hit me tomorrow. No, sabi niya, no hurry, you can do it on the 14th. I said, no, hit me tomorrow, May 13. Sabi niya, kang bahala. And so he asked me, may I know why you want the 13? My friends, in 1975, I went on a hunger strike for 40 days and 40 nights. On May 5, 1975, my blood pressure dropped 60/40 and they could hardly feel my heartbeat and I had no pulse. And they rushed me to the Veterans Memorial Hospital. On May 13, 1975, on the 40th day of my fast, and that was my pact with my Lord, that I will go for 40 days and 40 nights because I wanted to die. But if you do not allow me to die, I said, then I take it, you still want me to continue, and your will be done. And so, on that day of the Lady of Fatima, May 30, 1975, I ended my fast. 5 years to the day. On May 5, 1980, and all because I wanted to wait for the burial of my doctor, they brought me out to the heart center. And then, on May 13, I was scheduled to have my triple heart bypass. 5 years to the day. I do not know the meaning of those coincidences. And so I told my doctor, hit me tomorrow because I will survive. And so I finished my operation, and I was recuperating. And I cabled Mr. Marcos after my operation. I told him, operation has been successful, however, I developed a pericarditis. My doctors advised me 4 more weeks of convalescence. However, if you feel I should now return to my cell, I shall immediately take the first plane to go back to my cell. Mr. Marcos had General Ver call me and said, pinasasabi po ni Presidente, magpalakas na muna kayo dyan. Take your time, and when you are strong and ready, you can return. A week later, the international press came out with the story. Mr. Marcos extends indefinitely the stay of Aquino in America. On the basis of that report, I wired Harvard University and I said, I am now ready to accept the fellowship that you offered me. And Harvard University extended the invitation again to become a fellow at the Center for International Affairs. And that's the story. But I have no intention of seeking political asylum in America, as you know. I've always said that I shall return to the Philippines as soon as my Harvard fellowship is over, and I took it only because Mr. Marcos extended my stay indefinitely. But when I was convalescing, and I was receiving hundreds, thousands of letters from all over the world, America and the Philippines, Filipinos sending me $5 and $10 to help me in my hospitalization, sending me little money, token of money for my fellowship in Harvard. There was one underlying note in all of these letters. We waited for you for 8 years. Will you now abandon us? I am a human being, my friends. I have suffered 8 years of imprisonment. I have suffered loneliness like no other man has suffered loneliness in my life. I have been away from my children and my family, and I am financially ruined after 8 years. It is only instinctive for a man to look for his peace. And I debated with my mind, and I debated with myself, and I debated with my wife and my children whether I should go back to the arena of combat. I felt that I already earned my peace. I have done my best. I waited for 7 years and 7 months, and the Filipino people did not react. And they would even give me the impression that they loved their chain and their slavery. What can one man do if the Filipino people love their slavery? If the Filipino people have lost their voice and would not say no to a tyrant, what can one man do? I have no army, I have no following, I have no money, I only have my indomitable spirit. But the letters kept pouring in, and they said, we waited for you for 8 years. Will you now abandon us? And so with nostalgia, I recalled the situation in my prison. There in that prison, I shared a cell with a great Filipino. His name is Senator Jose W. Jokno, one of the most respected men in our country, a man who could not be bribed, a man whose towering integrity is a byword with the youth. He stayed with me for 2 years in jail, and then after 2 years he was released. No charges, no explanation. There were 100,000 Filipinos who went through those jails. Hardly 10% were charged. They were arrested without charges. They were released without explanation. That is what happened to our country. And what about the mothers and the children who lost their breadwinners when these people went to jail? In my compound, there were only 4 of us. Myself, Jose Maria Sison, his wife, and Lieutenant Corpus. I did not know that there was another one, a 5th one, who was barely 150 meters away from my cell. I never knew that there was a young man by the name of Sixto Carlos Jr. It was only when I was released that I finally read his poignant story. You know what they did to this man? They tortured him no end for 2 weeks. They kept him in a safe house. They fed him poison, and his body became numb. And finally, he lost his senses, and therefore they cannot bring him back to his family because they took him apart and they cannot put him back together. This young man was a student leader in the UP. He did not see the sun and the moon for 124 days. He was chained to his cot. Jose Maria Sison was chained to his cot. His feet was chained. His hand was chained. You cannot see a more inhuman situation. And I want to tell you, my friends, until you have tasted this loneliness, you will not know what solitary confinement means. They brought me to a mountain hideout in the Sierra Madre and placed me in a box. I had only my brief and my t-shirt. I refused to eat because I thought they were poisoning me. There was nothing in the room, barely nothing. And I had nothing to do but twiddle my thumb. And for the first time in my life, I heard the ticking of every second, and I was counting every second into minutes. And as the minutes marched into hours, and the hours into days, and days into weeks, I knew what loneliness meant. And therefore, as I thought back, that there are still many valiant Filipinos fighting for freedom, fighting for your right to speak. These are the people who are putting their lives on the line. These are people who abandon their loved ones and the comforts of their home, the wealth of their offices, to be able to bring freedom back and to be true to our founding fathers. And so I told my wife, much as we have found our peace and our freedom, I will have to return to combat. And so 6 weeks after my operation, I was still very weak. I went to Damascus, Syria, to meet with our Muslim brothers because I wanted to get to the root cause of this problem. 100,000 Filipino Muslims have already been killed. 300,000 are now refugees in Sabah. More than 20,000 Filipino soldiers have been killed in the last 8 years. And only 72 hours ago, 118 Filipino soldiers were massacred in Pada-Pada. And therefore, I wanted to go there, talk to our brothers in the Middle East, and plead with them to stop this carnage because we are all Filipinos. In spite of my weakness, I went to the MNLF hoping to find a solution. And when I came back to Dallas, Texas, I immediately took the telephone and I called Mr. Marcos and I told his Deputy Defense Minister. I went to Damascus, Syria. I talked to the Muslims. I did it on my own because I am aggrieved by the bloodshed that has occurred. Tell the President I have a formula. Maybe, I said, this is my way to help our people. Tell the President, I said, what he has done to me, I have already forgiven. And I have already forgotten. I have no bitterness against Mr. Marcos. I have no rancor against Mr. Marcos. All I want to do is to help our people stop this bloodshed. So please tell the President, I said, I have a formula. In 2 days, I said, I will be sending him a formula. And I wrote this formula, a secret formula I sent to Mr. Marcos, and I said, Mr. Marcos, Filipinos are dying. And this is a possible breakthrough. What did Mr. Marcos do? He told the press that he sent me to Damascus, Syria as his agent and as his spy. And so I stayed on to recuperate in Dallas, Texas. Delegations upon delegations came to me. People whose name I cannot now tell you because their lives are in danger. They told me, Mr. Senator, they said, we have waited 8 years for you. Lead us. We are now ready. I said, with what? With water pistols? and said, no, sir, we are ready. They brought me to their training camps. They took me elsewhere, outside the United States, and showed me. Maybe we are a handful. Maybe we are few. But we are now ready to lay down our lives, and these are young Filipino boys and girls. These are boys and girls who come from the better families, who come from the better schools, but have now said, the time has come, we either put up or shut up. And so again, I entered into a long agony. Because I could not, for the like of me, condone violence. I told them, if you go into the road of violence, it will only lead to more violence, I said. If you kill one, Marcos will kill two, we kill three, and Marcos will kill four, and what will happen to our country? We cannot, I said, go to a road of violence. Because violence will only beget more violence, I said.